We're about to wrap up the show, about to wrap up the second hour of the show in totality. And we always do so with our hashtag Heard on Air feature. This is part of the show where we reflect on some of the brilliant and wonderful conversations that were had on the show. And we're going to be reflecting on Wednesday nights in conversation with Inayat Wadi. He had a really wonderful conversation on Syria's new power play, how ties with the US and Israel are almost reshaping the country and reshaping the region. And he was joined by British journalist Yvonne Ridley and Jeenah. He's a senior researcher at the Mapungubwe Institute for Strategic Reflection, MISTRA for short. So if you missed that conversation, take a listen, and I'll be back with you again next week for the Tuesday edition of the show. Enjoy your weekend. Enjoy the rest, or what's little left of this week, and it was a pleasure. Jazakallah so much. Assalamu alaikum. Shab shab.
Endured years of war, repression, foreign intervention, and enormous suffering. Any genuine move towards a more stable and accountable Syria has to be welcomed. But I remain cautious because transformation is not just about changing the people at the top. It has to be reflected in the treatment of ordinary citizens, including those detained without process. And I'm really sad to report that there are scores of people in the former Assad prisons, including a friend of mine, the American journalist Bilal Abdul Karim. I think he's known to you, Inayat, and certainly to the station. And his case is a very real test of whether the new Syria is going to be different from the old. The green shoots of hope are there, the possibility of ending the cycle of dictatorship and war. But the biggest reason for optimism is the possibility that Syria can finally move beyond the decades of authoritarian rule and years of devastating civil war. Millions of Syrians want something much more than basic ideology, security, dignity, functioning institutions, and the ability to rebuild their lives. The task to rebuild Syrian sovereignty is enormous, but Syria has been a battlefield for competing foreign powers for years. During the civil war, Russia, Iran, Turkey, and the United States, as well as Israel, all had major interests or military involvement. So a genuinely sovereign Syria, able to make its own decisions rather than being a proxy battlefield, would be a huge development. But the country is virtually in rubble. Rebuilding institutions rather than personalities is going to be a priority. And this is crucial because the real test is whether Syria can develop institutions that survive changes of leadership. An independent judiciary, professional civil service, accountable security services, and functioning local government would be much more significant than simply changing a face at the top. There is enormous potential if the new political order can persuade Syria's different communities that they have a future within the country. I'm talking about the Sunnis, the Alawites, the Christians, the Kurds, the Druze, and other communities. They all need guarantees that they are citizens first and foremost, not communities whose safety depends upon whoever happens to control Damascus. And then there is potentially an enormous economic dividend from the peace, and that is in reconstruction. Where do you begin? Syria needs roads, hospitals, schools, electricity, housing, and jobs. Reconstruction could become a vehicle for actually bringing Syrians together, provided it isn't captured by political elites or foreign interests. And there's all, I think Naeem touched on this, the return of the Syrians. Millions of Syrians have been displaced. If conditions genuinely improve, voluntary and safe return could become one of the most powerful indicators that Syria is changing. But voluntary is the key word. People must return because they believe Syria is safe, not because they have nowhere else to go. But now for the red flags, this is where I think the plight of Bilal Abdul Karim becomes particularly powerful. This arbitrary detention, you know, you can't say, for me, well, this is one of the clearest tests of whether we are really going to see transformation. If someone can be, like Bilal, can be detained indefinitely without being formally charged, given access to a lawyer, or brought before a court, then the language of transformation starts to ring hollow. That doesn't require a great leap of faith. You know, Bilal Abdul Karim was the founder of the OGN news service. And this new regime under Ahmed al-Sharaa must show that it does not fear journalism. You know, journalism is not a crime. We've seen how Israel treats journalists in the Middle East. We don't want to see that becoming the norm in this new Syria. So I would like to see some practical things done straight away. And again, going back to Bilal Abdul Karim, charge him or release him. Give him access to a lawyer, give him a fair hearing. And that is the basic standard that should apply to everyone.
Yes, Yvonne. Yes,
So
I'd like to bring Naeem back into the discussion. And Naeem, Yvonne makes a point about this is not about simply changing about the face at the top. And just to understand the strategic reality in terms of why Syria has become such a central target. And again, the question that I had posed to Yvonne earlier on as well, in terms of these talks that are taking place, the US assuming its role as an honest broker, but also in terms of why Syria has actually become a central target for competing or of competing regional powers. If you could unmute, please, Naeem. Your mic is muted.
Okay, I think you can hear me now. As Yvonne pointed out, I mean, it's not that Syria has now become a target for competing forces. This has been the case. Certainly, this was the case from 2011 during the civil war. All of the countries that she spoke about, Turkey, Iran, Russia, the US, Iraq, etc., all Israel, etc., all of these countries believed that they had some kind of a stake, that they had some kind of interests. And this is one of the tragedies, is that Syrians were not allowed to kind of find their own way in a sense. I mean, I'm not saying that no one should assist them and they should find their own way by themselves, but anyone who got involved because of their own interests, and those were multiple actors. So that has been the case since 2011, but it was the case before 2011 as well. And that is why during the civil war, the issue of Syria for many activists around the world became quite a hot and debated issue because of other allegiances rather than allegiances to the Syrian people. So it is now a big target as a kind of continuation of that. In fact, I think it might be a bit of a smaller target now than it was before. As regards the talks that you're talking about and the role of the United States, look, none of the three of us in this discussion would ever believe that the United States is an honest broker in anything. If the past few months of the war against Iran has shown us anything, it's that the United States is very comfortable with lying bald-facedly and then actually seeming to believe its own lies. The honest broker notion you can apply for the past 5-6 decades to the role that the US has played in the Palestinian issue. Sorry, my camera is getting hijacked here. In the Palestinian issue, the US is never an honest broker. The US has two important agendas. One is the United States, and the second one is Israel. And so even with Syria, I think under Trump, and this is not to give any kind of praise or compliment to Trump, but under Trump, the adherence to the Israeli agenda is a little less than it was under previous American presidents. And so you see, even in the Syrian issue, that the Israelis, Netanyahu in particular, make certain